Senator, the proof never deceives, only individuals do. Adam Schiff thought he could ruin Kash Patel by challenging his allegiance and trustworthiness. He intended to brand him a political pawn, charge him with turning the federal agency into a partisan tool, and assert that his push for openness harmed the nation's safety. He lacked any idea that Patel had anticipated this precise instance. He had released the confidential bureau records demonstrating that Schiff deceived the public regarding foreign coordination for an extended period. He held documentation of surveillance warrant deception, possessed logs of unauthorized disclosures, and obtained verification of misconduct within the intelligence panel. This is the result of deceiving an agency chief who holds all the verifying documents. The atmosphere in the Senate Judiciary Committee chamber felt unique on that Thursday morning. The air held a tension so dense it was almost palpable, blending eager expectation with deep apprehension. Every person in attendance realized that the impending events would go down in history. The reason was not the formal topic of the gathering. Bureau openness and responsibility sounded like standard administrative review. It represented the kind of proceeding broadcast by public affairs networks, while major news channels typically disregarded it. Nevertheless, this session stood apart due to the individual providing testimony. Positioned at the respondent's desk was Kash Patel, the 44-year-old Indian-American bureau chief and child of immigrant parents. He was a self-driven legal aid attorney who became a national prosecutor and previous congressional intelligence aide who had exposed agency overreach. He previously served as the second-in-command of national intelligence and had recently led the primary federal law enforcement agency for half a year. That half-year period was defined by the release of confidential records. It was a 6-month span dedicated to revealing the overreach of prior leadership. Those 6 months focused on rebuilding public faith via complete openness. This recent time frame had thoroughly frightened the Capitol's elite class since openness inevitably led to responsibility. Responsibility ultimately resulted in facing repercussions. Positioned opposite Patel in the raised seating area designated for specialists was Adam Schiff, the veteran lawmaker from California. The 64-year-old was a prior representative and the past leader of the lower chamber's intelligence panel. He was the individual who had dedicated 4 years to convincing the nation he held proof of coordination between the campaign and a foreign power. He was the figure who had served as the primary symbol of the high-profile probe. He was the man who constructed his nationwide reputation upon a falsehood. At this moment, he was present to assail the agency director who had verified that very falsehood. Schiff donned a charcoal suit paired with a patriotic lapel emblem. It represented his typical appearance, projecting a somber and grave demeanor. He displayed the visage of someone protecting the republic, or at least that was the facade he maintained. Behind his delicate spectacles, his eyes fluttered rapidly, revealing an involuntary tic and a bodily display of anxiety disguised as confidence. The viewing area was entirely occupied, lacking any vacant spots. However, the initial rows illustrated the true significance of this proceeding. Carter Page occupied a seat in the premier row, directly positioned behind the director. He was 53 years old, bearing a countenance weathered by prolonged anxiety. He was the individual previously branded as a foreign espionage asset. He had endured observation under surveillance orders rooted in deceptive filings. He had forfeited his profession, his good name, and his financial reserves while fighting claims that the agency recognized as fabricated. He arrived to finally witness the genuine narrative shared openly with supporting documentation. Seated beside him was a middle-aged woman identified as Michael Flynn's sister. She was the relative of the military commander charged with deceiving the Bureau, stemming from a discussion that the investigating operatives initially deemed truthful. His financial security had been decimated by attorney expenses. His admission of guilt had been forced via ultimatums involving the prosecution of his child. She attended to witness someone ultimately reveal the injustices inflicted upon her sibling. Located behind them rested an assembly of professionally dressed men and women. They represented past federal agents and informants who had voiced alarms regarding the probe, surveillance exploitation, and partisan coercion. They had suffered dismissal, marginalization, reassignment, and scrutiny simply for voicing their thoughts. They gathered to discover if their long-awaited exoneration had materialized. The journalistic footprint was massive. 3 prominent broadcast networks, specialized news channels, and written press correspondents attended with active recording equipment. This did not resemble standard congressional supervision. This constituted a profound day of reckoning. Chairman Chuck Grassley called the assembly to order. The Republican from Iowa was 90 years old and held the title of the most tenured lawmaker. He had witnessed everything throughout his half-century in the upper chamber. Even he appeared cognizant that this particular session would unfold uniquely. "This hearing of the Senate Judiciary Committee will come to order," his voice echoed with the gravity of many decades. "We are here today for oversight of the FBI's transparency and declassification initiatives under Director Patel's leadership." He paused and scanned the space, observing the filming equipment and the audience witnessing a historic moment. "We have invited Senator Adam Schiff, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, to provide his perspective as an expert witness. He has expressed concerns about Director Patel's approach to classified information and intelligence operations." The manner in which the chairman articulated this illustrated his underlying stance, though he intended to conduct an impartial proceeding where evidence could dictate the narrative. "Senator Schiff, you may proceed with your opening statement." Schiff rose to his feet, aligned his spectacles, and inhaled deeply. This represented his crucial opportunity. It was his occasion to ruin the individual currently dismantling his historical footprint. It was his moment to annihilate the man bringing his deceptions to light. It was his chance to eliminate the person tearing down the storyline that anchored his entire political trajectory. He had readied himself for this, practicing thoroughly, speaking with supporters, and organizing with sympathetic journalists. He was completely prepared. What remained unknown to him was that his opponent had also done his homework. For half a year, he had examined every single document. He had been releasing the most incriminating proof available. He was structuring a legal argument much like his days as a federal litigator managing sensitive domestic security matters. Proof took priority, records came next, allowing the facts to articulate themselves. Schiff commenced with his tone exuding that distinct self-righteousness defining his public persona. It embodied the ethical absolute of an individual assuming his personal virtue granted him power. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I come before this committee today with deep concerns about the direction of our premier law enforcement agency under the current leadership." He shifted his gaze toward the recording devices. This action targeted the viewing public, his voting base, and his historical standing. "For over 2 decades, I have dedicated my career to protecting our national security as a federal prosecutor, as a member of Congress, and as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee during one of the most consequential investigations in American history." It served as his initial assertion of qualifications and fundamental demand for respect. "I led the investigation into foreign interference in our election. I saw the evidence, I reviewed the intelligence, and I can state unequivocally that our democracy was attacked. Individuals connected to the campaign had contacts with operatives that raised serious counterintelligence concerns. It represented meticulous wording, avoiding a direct allegation of coordination while hinting at it, a tactic he adopted after initial findings yielded nothing. "Which brings me to Director Patel." He pointed toward the witness table, turning the matter into a personal grievance. The director was not an agent or an intelligence officer. He was a partisan congressional staffer. He worked for the opposition on the House Intelligence Committee. He wrote memos attacking the Bureau's investigation. He pushed conspiracy theories about what he called the deep state. He actively worked to undermine the investigation into foreign interference. His tone escalated, gathering intensity. And now, inexplicably, he leads the very agency he spent years attacking. And what is he doing? He is declassifying documents, releasing sensitive intelligence, and exposing sources and methods, all to rewrite history, all to vindicate his former boss, all to settle political scores. The charge was thoroughly articulated. The agency head was deemed politically biased, unfit, and a hazard. I have reviewed some of the documents he has declassified, and I am deeply concerned. He is releasing selective information and cherry-picking documents that support a false narrative. He is creating the impression that the investigation was improper when it was, in fact, one of the most important counterintelligence investigations in history. Schiff's eyes fluttered swiftly behind his lenses 3 times in rapid progression. This served as his involuntary signal. By declassifying this information, he is damaging our national security. He is making it harder for the Bureau to recruit sources. He is exposing investigative techniques. He is undermining the very institution he is supposed to lead. He stopped to let the words linger, setting up his conclusion. But perhaps most concerning is his motivation. I have seen nothing in his background that suggests he understands the complexity of intelligence work. There is nothing that suggests he values the independence of law enforcement. Everything suggests he views the agency as a weapon to attack his political enemies. The lawmaker fixed his gaze straight across the room at this moment. I have seen evidence of interference, real evidence. I have seen intelligence showing concerning contacts between campaign officials and foreign operatives. I have seen information that raised legitimate counterintelligence questions. This was his renowned assertion, the phrase he had echoed for years. I have evidence. The American people deserve a director who will protect them from foreign threats. They do not deserve one who will declassify intelligence to rewrite history. They do not deserve one who will politicize law enforcement. They do not deserve one who serves one man instead of serving the law. This represented the ultimate strike. He should resign because he lacks the credibility to lead, because his partisan background disqualifies him, because the American people deserve better than a director who uses classified information as a political weapon. The senator returned to his seat, content with his delivery. He had successfully planted the storyline. The target was characterized as biased, perilous, and lacking credentials. The press was primed to broadcast it widely. Politicians would reference it. This was destined to become the prevailing narrative. Up in the viewing area, Page gently moved his head from side to side. He had encountered these exact charges previously, both directed at himself and at anyone else who doubted the prevailing tale: foreign operative, paranoid fringe thinker, political hack. These constituted the tags utilized to ruin anybody who defied the account. At the respondent's desk, the director remained entirely motionless. He offered no visible response, displayed no guarded posture, and revealed no hostility. Only pure tranquility remained. It embodied the composure of a man who had brought terrorists to justice and realized that sentiment forfeited legal battles while facts secured them. It was the serenity of an individual possessing records that the opposition desperately wanted hidden permanently. The chairman interjected, asserting that the witness could respond. The director repositioned his audio device. He directed his gaze upward toward the gallery, followed by the broadcasting lenses, and finally the audience area. He locked eyes with the exonerated men and women in the crowd. He was recognizing their presence and validating the hardships they had faced. As he communicated, his tone remained crisp and authoritative, lacking any distinct geographic dialect. It belonged to an individual accustomed to advising heads of state, litigating major offenses, and grasping complex national security matters. However, beneath the polished execution lurked restrained outrage. It stemmed from exasperation over falsehoods maintained for an extended period, coupled with a resolve to lay bare the facts. Senator, thank you for your testimony. I appreciate you sharing your concerns about the transparency initiatives. His delivery was polite, devoid of mockery, offering simple bureaucratic respect. You have made several serious accusations about my qualifications, about my motivations, and about the declassification process. I would like to address those accusations, but first I want to address your central claim. He extended his hand toward a binder situated on the desk before him. The binder was substantial and packed with various papers. Every single page featured security-level markings, the majority being struck out and substituted with crimson ink declaring them cleared for public viewing. You stated that you saw evidence of collusion. You stated that you reviewed intelligence showing coordination. You stated that you have evidence. He stared plainly at the legislator. Senator, I have been director for 6 months. In that time, I have reviewed every file related to the investigation. I have reviewed every report and every interview summary. I have reviewed every piece of intelligence collected by the Bureau during that investigation. He hesitated slightly, building anticipation for the disclosure. And I have declassified significant portions of that material because I believe the American people deserve to know the truth about what their government did and did not do. He extracted the initial paper and raised it, making it sufficiently visible for the recording devices to document. The security labels were evident across the upper margin, featuring the highest restriction tier canceled out and a crimson release stamp applied. This is a memo dated January 2017. It is from before the special counsel was appointed and before your committee began its investigation. He recited straight from the paper, ensuring exact accuracy. Let the agency's own language speak. The investigation into potential coordination has not identified evidence of criminal conspiracy or coordination as of January 2017. Extensive interviews with campaign officials, surveillance operations, and intelligence liaison have not revealed evidence of coordinated activity. He raised his eyes to allow the magnitude of that statement to register. In January 2017, the Bureau already knew there was no coordination. Senator, this memo was distributed to congressional leadership, including the House Intelligence Committee. Your name appears on the distribution list. He presented a transmittal document where the lawmaker's identity was plainly apparent. So in January 2017, you were briefed that they had found no evidence of criminal conspiracy or coordination. Yet within weeks, you went on national television and claimed you had evidence of collusion. A subsequent paper was withdrawn from the binder. This is another memo dated March 2017. It is from after 2 years of investigation. Despite extensive investigation across multiple field offices, the Bureau has not developed evidence supporting prosecution under criminal conspiracy statutes. Interviews and surveillance operations have not revealed coordination between campaign officials and foreign entities. He placed the paper on the surface with deliberate and cautious precision. In March 2017, there was still no evidence. Oh, but Senator, in that same month you gave an interview to national news. You said, and I quote, "I have seen evidence of collusion that is not circumstantial and is very much worthy of investigation." He fixed his gaze on his counterpart, displaying facts rather than fury. So the agency, with all its investigative resources, found no evidence, but you claim to have evidence, which raises a question. Either you never actually saw the intelligence, or you saw it and deliberately lied about what it said. The initial rhetorical strike was surgical, exact, and grounded entirely in written records. They consisted of official files featuring the politician's identity on the recipient logs. Up in the viewing area, observers shifted closer to the railing. This felt distinct from mere partisan bickering. This constituted actual proof. These comprised authorized agency reports, newly cleared for the public and entirely irrefutable. The lawmaker's complexion reddened considerably. He attempted to intercede, asserting that the probe remained unfinished at that juncture. Senator, you said you saw evidence. The response remained remarkably steady. Not that you had suspicions, not that you had concerns, you said you had evidence. The agency said they had no evidence. One of you was lying. He retrieved additional files, producing a considerable pile. I have 17 additional memos from different field offices and different time frames, all saying the same thing: no evidence of conspiracy, no evidence of coordination, and no evidence of collusion. He scattered them across the desk, creating a visual exhibit of validation. So when you tell the American people you have evidence, you are either incompetent because you could not read your own intelligence briefings, or you are dishonest. He paused to let that stark dichotomy linger in the atmosphere. And based on what I'm about to show you, I believe it is the latter. He accessed a fresh compartment within his binder. These pages possessed a distinct visual character. They constituted surveillance requests, judicial submissions, and reviews by the internal watchdog. The chamber became completely hushed. Every individual present anticipated what was about to unfold. It centered on the surveillance warrant deception. It represented the overreach that had completely wrecked lives. It was the same overreach the politician had justified for multiple years, and currently it was being unmasked utilizing his personal files. It demonstrated awareness of the deception and the subsequent justification of it regardless. This transcended mere partisan drama. It felt like an official prosecution. He extracted the subsequent file from his binder. It appeared more substantial and formal, displaying the emblem of the Foreign Surveillance Tribunal prominently at the upper edge. Let us talk about the surveillance targets. Up in the audience section, the affected individuals adjusted their posture. This was their awaited instance at last. They are here today. They have lived through what I'm about to describe, and I want them to hear the truth told publicly with evidence. With the documents the Bureau should have provided to the court but did not. The surveillance request was hoisted into view. It was a dense file, highly censored even in its public format, yet featuring vital segments illuminated in bright yellow. The agency obtained 4 warrants for surveillance across several months. Each warrant allowed the collection of all communications, emails, phone calls, and text messages, everything. He clarified the breadth, ensuring all present grasped the full magnitude. Under the 3-hop rule, they could also surveil everyone the target communicated with, and everyone they communicated with, and everyone they communicated with. Essentially, they used these warrants to surveil hundreds of people. He hesitated briefly to let the sheer scale permeate the room, all based on probable cause that the target was acting as a foreign agent. He shifted his focus between the legal filing, the audience, and specifically toward the accused in the gallery. There was one problem. The target was not a foreign agent, and the agency knew it. A fresh page was introduced, displaying an intelligence agency's official header. This is dated 2 months before the first application was submitted. He recited strictly from the printed text. The subject has been an approved operational contact for years. The subject has provided information on foreign intelligence activities and has been used as an asset in active operations. The assessment shows a loyal citizen whose contact with foreign officials has been in support of our own objectives. The phrasing hovered heavily in the chamber. The individual was assisting the nation's intelligence apparatus rather than committing treason against the country. He was helping it. The Bureau received this memo. It is in their case files. A lawyer forwarded it to the supervisory agent working the investigation. The digital correspondence thread was displayed, ensuring identities and timestamps were clearly visible. But this information was never included in the applications. Instead, the applications claimed the target was working with foreign intelligence. They claimed his contacts were suspicious. They claimed he posed a counterintelligence threat. He placed the papers adjacent to one another, highlighting the stark discrepancy. One agency said he was helping us, the other told the court he was helping them. They were opposite claims, and both could not be true. The delivery conveyed a deeply measured fury at this juncture. Actually, we know which was true because a lawyer pleaded guilty to altering an email about this relationship. A subsequent paper detailing legal charges lodged in a national tribunal was exhibited. He changed an email. The original said he is a source and has provided information. He altered it to say he is not a source. He repeated that phrasing with deliberate slowness. He literally changed it from is a source to is not a source. Then he forwarded the altered email to his supervisors, who used it to support the renewal application. He directed his gaze at the seasoned lawmaker. Senator, as chairman of the committee, you had access to the underlying documents. You knew about the memo. You knew the target was helping us. Yet you publicly defended the warrants. He extracted media snippets of the politician's television appearances on major cable networks. Months after concerns about abuse were raised, you went on national television. You said the applications were appropriate and properly predicated. You called the memo questioning them political and dangerous to our national security. He broadcasted the undeniable inconsistency. But you knew they had withheld exculpatory evidence. You knew about the assessment, you knew a lawyer had altered evidence, yet you defended the warrants anyway. The unstated query lingered heavily. Why? Why protect monitoring operations that you understood were entirely fraudulent? Up in the viewing gallery, eyes brimmed with moisture. 4 excruciating years designated as a national betrayer. 4 years of existence completely dismantled. 4 years passed while figures validated the monitoring, branded him an operative, and shattered his standing. Now the top official stood reading the precise memo verifying the truth all along. He had not concluded his presentation. In late 2019, the Inspector General released a massive report on abuse in the investigation. He elevated the authoritative dossier for all to observe. The review found 17 significant errors and omissions in the applications. Not minor mistakes, but significant errors that undermined the entire probable cause showing. He cataloged them with systematic precision. 1, they did not tell the court about the prior source relationship. 2, they included unverified dossier information. 3, they did not inform the court when the primary source disavowed the information. 4, they did not include exculpatory information about contacts. 5, a lawyer altered evidence to hide the relationship. On and on, 17 errors. Each one was significant. Each one was material to probable cause. The Inspector General concluded that had the court known the truth, the last 2 warrants would never have been issued. He stared directly at the representative. Senator, after this report was released, you issued a statement. You said the report vindicated the investigation and that the errors were of a lesser nature that did not affect the validity of the warrants. He displayed the official declaration and quoted from its contents. But the report specifically said the warrants lacked probable cause. It said the errors were so egregious that the surveillance should never have occurred. How is that lesser errors? How is that vindication? The politician provided no verbal retort. His eyelids now fluttered swiftly, signaling distress with multiple rapid blinks. The nervous habit was gaining momentum. I will tell you why you said that. Because admitting the truth meant admitting the entire investigation was built on a foundation of misconduct. Admitting the surveillance was based on altered evidence and withheld information would mean admitting you were wrong. He pointed toward the audience. Lives were lost, reputations ruined, and savings drained defending against allegations known to be false. They were labeled spies by media, by politicians, and by people who had been briefed and knew the truth. His tone elevated slightly, displaying genuine sentiment for the initial time. And you defended the warrants, even after the documented errors, even after a guilty plea for altering evidence, even after it was proven that probable cause did not exist. He halted to let the grave allegation resonate. Why defend surveillance you knew was based on fraud? The chairman interceded, his elderly tone commanding respect. Would you like to respond to the questions? The lawmaker got to his feet, his vocal delivery strained and defensive. The process, while flawed in its execution, was based on legitimate counterintelligence concerns. That is not an answer, the chairman firmly stated. He asked why you defended warrants you knew were fraudulent. Yes or no, did you know about the memo regarding the target? A quiet tension settled over the room. His eyes fluttered 5 times in rapid progression. I was briefed on various aspects. Yes or no, Senator? A deeper hush enveloped the chamber. Then he answered softly, I was aware of prior contact with intelligence agencies. And did you publicly state that the warrants were proper and the committee believed them? Yes or no? Yes. The confession lingered heavily in the environment. He recognized the truth, yet he continually supported the false labeling. He maintained his defense of the deceptive monitoring operations. The gravity of the confession registered before the subsequent binder was accessed. Now let us talk about your famous claim, I have evidence. The politician's complexion lost all color. This represented the fatal strike, and he recognized the reality. A signature phrase. You used it, a signature phrase. You used it repeatedly for 4 years on major networks, in congressional hearings, and in press releases. He produced a collection containing numerous sheets of verbatim statements asserting the existence of proof. Let me play a few examples. A sound recording of him speaking on a major news network resonated through the room. I have seen evidence of collusion, and this evidence is not circumstantial, it is direct evidence of coordination. A subsequent recording from another major network aired shortly after. It declared, "There is evidence in plain sight, and the people have a right to know what our intelligence shows." A third recording from a broadcast network echoed loudly. It claimed, "I have seen more than circumstantial evidence and I cannot share classified information, but I can say that evidence exists." The playback paused and the gaze locked onto the politician. "You said variations of this hundreds of times. The people believed you. Polls showed a majority thought there was collusion because you told them evidence existed." He extracted survey data graphs illustrating popular sentiment aligning directly with the television appearances. Your claims shaped public perception. You were chairman of the committee. People trusted that when you said you had seen evidence, evidence existed. A fresh file showcasing a briefing synopsis was unveiled. "But I have reviewed every classified briefing you received. I have reviewed every file you accessed. I have reviewed every piece of intelligence they showed you." He raised the synopsis, displaying the recipient logs with the lawmaker's identity featured prominently. "And I can state categorically they never had evidence of criminal conspiracy or coordination." Which means you never saw such evidence in briefings because it did not exist. First document from the files dated the same month you started claiming to have evidence. The briefing stated, "Investigation ongoing but has not yet identified evidence of criminal conspiracy. Interviews completed to date have not revealed coordination." Your name is on the distribution list. You received this briefing. Second document, dated months later, another briefing to your committee. Despite extensive investigation across multiple field offices, they have not developed evidence supporting criminal conspiracy charges. Third document, dated late that year. The investigation has not identified evidence of criminal conspiracy. Multiple investigative techniques, including surveillance and confidential sources, have not revealed coordinated activity. He distributed them widely, demonstrating that successive updates all concluded there was no proof. Senator, these are briefings to your committee. You were present for them. Your name is on every attendance sheet. You knew they had found no evidence of conspiracy. He produced television scheduling logs matched against the intelligence update dates. Yet within days, sometimes hours after receiving these briefings, you went on television and claimed you had seen evidence. The chronology proved overwhelmingly incriminating. A presentation indicating zero proof was immediately followed by television appearances claiming definitive proof. Over and over for months, you lied deliberately and systematically for years. The delivery remained restrained and expert, yet the charge was utterly catastrophic. Let us fast forward to the conclusion of the probe. The special counsel released his report after 2 years of investigation. After interviewing 500 witnesses, after reviewing over 1 million documents, after spending millions of dollars, he elevated the first portion of the investigator's massive summary regarding conspiracy. His conclusion stated, "The investigation did not establish that members conspired or coordinated with the foreign government in its election interference activities." He reiterated it methodically to guarantee everyone comprehended. Did not establish his prosecutor's language for, "We found no evidence." Despite 2 years of unlimited investigative resources, despite all agencies searching for connections, they found none. He fixed his gaze directly on his target. "Senator, how did you respond to the conclusion?" He produced a media segment of the lawmaker speaking on television the exact day the dossier went public. He initiated the sound recording. "The report confirms serious wrongdoing. The evidence of collusion is clear and compelling. There was obstruction and there should be impeachment." He halted the playback abruptly. "Senator, he explicitly said he did not establish conspiracy or coordination." How did you read that and claim the evidence was clear? There was absolutely zero rebuttal. There are only two possibilities. Either you cannot read or you lied. He waited patiently to let the harsh alternative settle. "And based on your law degree and your experience as a federal prosecutor, I am confident you can read, which leaves only one explanation. The charge was finalized, fully backed by documents and impossible to refute. However, he retained additional material, preserving the most destructive proof for his conclusion. In 2020, your committee released 57 witness interview transcripts from your investigation. They were interviews conducted years prior. He raised a massive pile of documented conversations measuring hundreds of pages in depth. These transcripts were classified. You controlled them as chairman, and you fought their release for 3 years. He brought out written exchanges demonstrating the formal resistance to publicizing the documents. You claimed releasing them would damage national security. You claimed that they contained sensitive sources and methods. You claimed that declassification would help foreign adversaries. He placed those communications to the side, but they were finally declassified over your objection. And when the people finally read them, they learned something very interesting. He accessed the documents and vocalized the emphasized portions. The ambassador testified under oath. Asked if she saw evidence of collusion, her answer was, quote, "I am not in possession of anything. I am not in possession of evidence of collusion." Next transcript. The Deputy National Security Advisor was asked the same question. Answer, quote, "I saw indications of potential coordination, but I wouldn't say I saw evidence of collusion." Next one. The National Security Advisor, quote, "I don't recall intelligence that I would characterize as evidence of collusion." On and on, administration officials, intelligence officers, and campaign officials, 57 witnesses all testifying under oath. Senator, not one of your 57 witnesses said they had seen evidence of collusion. Not one. The people who would have known if evidence existed all said they had not seen it. He locked his vision directly onto the accused lawmaker. These interviews happened early in the probe. Yet you went on television and continued claiming you had evidence after your own witnesses told you under oath that no evidence existed. He hoisted the printed records into the air, and you fought to keep these transcripts secret for 3 years, even though they were your investigation, your committee, and your witnesses. The reason is obvious now. You suppressed them because they proved you had been lying, because they showed everyone you interviewed said there was no evidence, because releasing them would expose your long deception. The vocal delivery became distinctly rigid. That is not oversight, Senator. That is a cover-up. You suppressed exculpatory evidence that proved the narrative was false while publicly claiming evidence existed. That is not just lying, that is obstruction. Up in the viewing area, former federal operatives bobbed their heads in agreement. They had understood the reality, had attempted to vocalize it, and had faced muzzle tactics. Now the truth was brought to light, utilizing irrefutable paperwork. The politician attempted to retort, his tone vibrating with defensive energy. Those transcripts were classified for legitimate reasons. They were classified to hide the truth, the swift interruption landed. They were classified because they proved you had been lying to the people for years, and when they were declassified over your objection, your lies were exposed. He produced a final binder. It appeared slimmer than the previous ones, yet it carried an even more profound gravity. Now let us talk about your leaks. The politician's complexion shifted from pale to entirely ashen. This represented his potential for criminal liability, and he was fully aware of it. The fresh compartment was accessed with meticulous care. Contained inside were telecommunication logs, appointment records, and digital correspondence summaries. All bore original security restriction tags, and all were now cleared for public viewing. Senator, let us discuss your relationship with the media during the investigation. He brought out the initial file displaying call histories from the intelligence panel. You had 114 documented contacts with reporters from major news outlets. He elevated the communication logs, making the dates, moments, and lengths unmistakable. These were not press conferences. These were off-the-record conversations, background briefings, private phone calls, and secret meetings. He exhibited records pointing to suppers at Capitol eateries, telecommunications from his workspace, and gatherings in protected environments. Many of these contacts happened within hours, sometimes minutes, of classified intelligence committee briefings. The chronology was laid out perfectly. Classified briefing at 2 p.m., call to a reporter at 5:30 p.m., story with classified details published the next morning. The pattern repeated over and over. Your committee receives a classified briefing, you contact a reporter, and a story appears with information that only committee members would know. A precise illustration was extracted from the pile. A specific date. Your committee receives a classified briefing containing details about surveillance operations and specific subjects under investigation. He presented the meeting registry with the lawmaker's identity marked present. That evening, you have dinner with a reporter, a 45-minute meal with the reservation in your name. Dining invoices and financial records were displayed. The next morning, a story is published detailing the information. The story includes details from the previous day's classified briefing that only committee members would possess. The linkage appeared glaring and entirely undeniable. He proceeded to list further instances. Another date, classified briefing on surveillance. That night, you speak with a reporter for 37 minutes, as phone records show the call. The next day, the network reports on warrants with details from the classified briefing. Another date. The committee receives classified grand jury information. The briefing is in a closed session with highly restricted information. That evening, there is a call to a reporter lasting 22 minutes. The next morning, a story includes grand jury details. It represented an endlessly repeating cycle. Restricted data surfaced in journalistic outlets shortly after the politician interacted with correspondents. Senator, leaking classified information is a federal crime. The code states whoever knowingly and willfully communicates classified information to an unauthorized person shall be fined or imprisoned. He locked his vision directly onto his target. Did you leak classified information to journalists? The retort arrived rapidly, excessively so, carrying a highly defensive tone. I had conversations with reporters as part of my public responsibility to inform Americans about threats to our democracy. That is not what I asked. Did you disclose classified information obtained in Intelligence Committee briefings to reporters who lacked security clearances? A profound quiet filled the room. The lawmaker's eyelids fluttered rapidly 8 separate times over 5 seconds. I am not going to discuss my conversations with reporters. That is effectively invoking the Fifth Amendment, the response noted. Interesting choice for someone accusing me of political prosecution. He produced further paperwork from his files. Let me tell you what else the Bureau has documented. Several media stories contained information that could only have come from one of 3 sources: the Bureau itself, the special counsel, or the committee. He exhibited the analytical process and deduction methodology. They conducted a leak investigation and determined the information did not come from the Bureau. The special counsel's office was notably disciplined about leaks, which left the committee. They narrowed it down to specific members based on who had access to specific information that appeared in stories. You were identified as the most likely source of 11 major leaks. He held high the agency report with the politician's identity illuminated, but prosecution was declined. Why? Because the Justice Department determined that charging a sitting congressman for leaking classified information would be politically sensitive. They determined that it might appear to be retaliation for his criticism of the executive. The vocal tone radiated absolute revulsion at this moment. So you leaked with impunity. You damaged national security with impunity. You exposed intelligence sources and methods with impunity because prosecutors were afraid of the political fallout. He glared straight at the seasoned legislator. But I am not a prosecutor anymore. I am director, and my job is to restore credibility to this institution, which means exposing abuse even and especially when that abuse was committed by members of Congress. The chairman interjected, inquiring if he was asserting he held proof of criminal behavior. I am saying I have evidence he leaked classified information. Whether that constitutes criminal conduct is for prosecutors to determine. But the people deserve to know that the chairman systematically leaked classified information to shape media coverage of a politically sensitive investigation. An ultimate file from the disclosure binder was unveiled. There is one more leak I want to discuss, the whistleblower. The lawmaker's eyes grew large with apprehension. This represented his most significant liability. An analyst filed a whistleblower complaint about a presidential call. That complaint triggered the first impeachment. He produced a chronological chart alongside emails and appointment registries. The whistleblower claimed he had no first-hand knowledge of the call. He had heard about it from others. But we now know he met with your staff before filing the complaint. He presented the appointment registries for visual inspection. The lawyer met with committee staff multiple times. Your staff coordinated with him, helped shape the complaint, and advised on process. This was documented in internal committee emails. He elevated the digital communications illustrating the staff members conferring about the informant. When this coordination was exposed, you went on television and denied it. You said, and I quote, "We have had no contact with the whistleblower. We have had no coordination with the whistleblower." He broadcasted the recording of the politician explicitly denying any interaction. But your staff had multiple meetings. Your committee had documentation. You knew about the coordination. His voice solidified with absolute conviction. You lied on television about coordination with a whistleblower whose complaint led to presidential impeachment. That is not intelligence oversight. That is a political operation. He removed a final piece of evidence from his collection. And then in the hearing, you read a parody of the transcript. You made up dialogue and presented it as if it were real before admitting minutes later it was a fabrication. A printed record of the hearing remarks featuring the invented recitation was exhibited. Senator, you fabricated evidence in an official congressional proceeding. You invented dialogue for a phone call in an impeachment investigation. He paused to let the massive weight of that reality settle in the room. You accused me of politicizing the agency, but you lied about collusion for 4 years. You leaked classified information repeatedly. You coordinated with a whistleblower, then lied about it. You fabricated evidence in an impeachment hearing. He surveyed the chamber, taking in the filming equipment, the audience, and the accused politician. Everything you accused others of doing, you actually did. Everything you claimed to oppose, you practiced. And now you have the audacity to question my integrity. The prosecution was finalized, entirely backed by documents and impossible to argue against. The politician possessed no rebuttal, offered no justification, and merely sat with fluttering eyelids and trembling fingers. The chairman posed the inquiry that every person wanted resolved. Senator, did you have evidence of collusion? It constituted a straightforward binary query. Silence extended for 10 seconds, then stretched to 20, and ultimately reached 30. I saw concerning contacts. That is not what I asked. Did you have evidence of criminal conspiracy or coordination? Yes or no? Further silence ensued. He found himself incapable of saying yes because the records definitively proved otherwise. He found himself incapable of saying no because doing so would confess to an extended period of deception. I will take that as a no, the chairman quietly remarked. The politician stood up swiftly, collecting his materials while his voice quavered with barely contained rage. Mr. Chairman, I came here in good faith to share my concerns about leadership. Instead, I have been subjected to a political attack by a director who is using classified information to settle scores. He shifted toward the exit, attempting to flee the environment. This is exactly what I warned about, weaponizing the agency and using his position to target political opponents. The people see through this. While he proceeded through the viewing area, observers rose to their feet. They uttered not a single word. They merely remained upright as quiet observers to the individual who had championed their torment for years. Relatives stood up in quiet condemnation. Informants rose up, representing the operatives who had sought to reveal the overreach and faced muzzling, yet now stood fully validated. The lawmaker accelerated his pace, nearly sprinting through the exit into the corridor. He was retreating from the lenses, from the inquiries, and from the indisputable facts he could not counter. The director maintained his position at the respondent's desk, composed and authoritative, surrounded by his spread of proof. They were the very papers that verified the entire narrative. The chairman spoke into his audio device, declaring the hearing adjourned. Thank you for your testimony and for your service. The wooden mallet struck the block decisively. The proof had communicated its message. The deceptions were laid bare for all to witness. The concealment operation had concluded, and the historical footprint, constructed upon 4 years of falsehoods, rested in absolute devastation. The broadcast segments of the proceeding became internet sensations within moments. Every massive digital network and every journalism enterprise, spanning from right-leaning to conventional, reported on the event. The visual of standing witnesses as the politician retreated garnered millions of views in a mere 6 hours. Vocalizing bureau files that debunked coordination accumulated tens of millions of views. The failure to confirm if he possessed proof amassed a massive digital audience. The chronological comparison between television appearances and intelligence updates captured public attention immensely. Right-leaning media platforms broadcasted the story without pause. The deception was definitively dismantled. Agency records demonstrated that the coordination narrative was entirely fabricated. The politician had exposed restricted intelligence on multiple separate occasions, yet a truly novel phenomenon materialized soon after. Conventional media outlets found themselves unable to dismiss the facts. The paperwork was genuine, encompassing released files, internal watchdog conclusions, judicial submissions, communication registries, and appointment logs. A major news network initiated inquiries regarding the assertions about the probe. A prominent capital newspaper declared that files fundamentally opposed the remarks concerning coordination proof. Even another major network acknowledged that the legislator faced intense examination for championing the surveillance authorizations. The accepted storyline was fracturing, not shattering entirely, but definitively fracturing. This occurred because the gathered proof was simply impossible to deny. Within a fortnight, survey numbers indicated a massive transformation in public sentiment. 67% of the citizenry felt they had been deceived regarding the probe. 58% concluded that surveillance warrant exploitation had indeed taken place. 51% determined the lawmaker had engaged in deception regarding his possession of proof. 43% demanded a legislative morality probe into the unauthorized disclosures. Crucially, public faith in the Bureau increased because the new openness demonstrated that the agency itself was not fundamentally broken. The true issue was the partisan exploitation of the institution by individuals like the representative. Recruitment inquiries surged significantly. The spirit among regional operatives recovered in a quantifiable manner. Informants finally experienced a sense of security when coming forward. The disinfectant of daylight functioned precisely as intended. Complete openness reestablished institutional trustworthiness. The lawmaker attempted to manage the fallout by penning a guest essay regarding the peril of weaponizing national intelligence for partisan benefit. He asserted that the agency head was distributing cherry-picked data. He claimed that the complete context would justify his past conduct. He insisted that he was suffering from partisan vengeance. No one bought his narrative because the released files were exhaustive. Communications had not been altered or trimmed. The internal watchdog assessment was a formal and final product. Witness testimonies were presented word for word. Communication logs were officially authenticated. His political allies began to pull away from him. Lawmakers who previously championed the probe now professed to harbor doubts. They asserted that they had depended heavily on his personal guarantees. They argued that they too had been deeply misled. The politician found himself marginalized, his trustworthiness obliterated, and his historical record in ashes. The upper chamber's morality panel announced a formal inquiry into his unauthorized disclosures. A formal request for criminal investigation regarding the exposure of restricted data was forwarded to the Justice Department. Demands for his departure from the upper chamber intensified rapidly. The individual who had sought to ruin others with falsehoods was ultimately ruined by irrefutable facts. Weeks following the proceeding, a civil suit was filed against the politician and the operatives tied to the surveillance deception. The filing alleged civil liberties violations, vindictive legal targeting, and character assassination. He had endured a 4-year nightmare, been branded a national traitor, forfeited his profession, and exhausted his financial reserves on attorney fees. This all transpired while the individuals accountable understood he was entirely blameless. Now he would finally have his opportunity to seek justice in a tribunal using the released files as his primary foundation. Previous legal matters were reopened for review. An inquiry into legal misconduct by prosecuting attorneys was officially initiated. Operatives who had ensnared targets encountered rigorous examination. Litigators who had concealed exonerating facts faced professional licensing grievances. Accountability had been postponed, yet it was finally materializing. 30 days subsequent to the proceeding, the agency head sat for a media discussion. He was questioned regarding whether he felt remorse for unmasking the politicians so prominently. He occupied the command suite at the primary facility. He was enveloped by portraits of operatives who had performed with excellence, perished while serving, and maintained their sworn pledges. "Regret?" he responded, moving his head from side to side with absolute certainty. "I regret that it took this long. I regret that innocent people suffered for years while the truth stayed classified. I regret that the people were lied to by someone who used his position to spread false narratives." His vocal delivery radiated absolute certainty. "But I don't regret exposing the lies. I don't regret declassifying evidence of abuse. I don't regret holding powerful people accountable." He displayed the proceeding footage on his monitor and paused on a visual of the files scattered across the desk. "Here's what I believe. The agency is filled with dedicated professionals who follow the evidence, who conduct investigations without political bias, and who serve the people honorably. But our institution was abused by political appointees who pressured agents, by politicians who leaked classified information, and by media who amplified false narratives without questioning sources." He shut down the portable computer. "My job is to restore credibility, not through rhetoric but through transparency. By showing the people what actually happened. By releasing evidence that was improperly classified to hide misconduct." His voice gained a slight passionate edge. He built his career on a hoax. He lied about having evidence. He defended fraud. He leaked classified information. He suppressed exculpatory transcripts. And he did all of it while claiming to protect democracy. He directed his gaze straight into the recording lens. "But democracy requires truth. It requires accountability. It requires that we hold powerful people to the same standards as everyone else." He accused me of politicizing the agency, but I am just releasing evidence. Evidence he wishes had stayed buried. Evidence that proves he lied to the people for 4 years. He offered a concluding reflection and a final statement. "The evidence does not lie, only people do. And when you are director with the evidence, you have a responsibility to release it. Even when, especially when, it exposes powerful people." He offered a subtle, faint grin. He said, "I am settling scores. I am not, I am settling accounts. There is a difference. Scores are personal. Accounts are about accountability, about truth, about justice. And after 4 years of lies, the people deserve accountability." The media segment exploded across the internet, amassing tens of millions of views. It circulated across every digital network and fueled dialogue on every broadcasting channel. In local barbershops, citizens observed it on their mobile devices. Patrons surrounding them were all paying attention and bobbing their heads in agreement. "Man speaks truth," one patron remarked. "About time somebody did," a second patron concurred. "Targeted those who had misused authority, targeted those who had misused authority, and who believed they operated above the legal system. The defensive barrier was fracturing because the proof was undeniable." He arrived with records, with declassified memorandums, with communication logs, and with appointment registries. He provided testimonial records brimming with undeniable facts that defied manipulation, rejection, or concealment. The proof had effectively communicated its profound reality. Following a 4-year period of deceptions, genuine truth had ultimately materialized.